I didn't say a word. I just nodded and reached for my glass of water. My brother stood at the head of the dinner table, surrounded by the whole family. My parents, my aunts and uncles, my cousins crammed into my parents' living room in Columbus, Ohio, and he said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Let's be honest. Simone's little online thing isn't a real career. She's 32 years old and she's still playing around on a laptop. Everyone laughed. My dad gave my brother a proud nod like he just said something wise. My mom smiled into her napkin. I picked up my fork. That was November. By February, my brother's construction firm was in free fall, and I was the reason it was still standing. He just didn't know that yet. Growing up, my brother and I were never equals in that house. He was 4 years older, which meant he got there first. First to make my dad proud. First to have a real job. First to buy a car. First to do everything that counted. I was the afterthought, the quiet one, the one who stayed in her room and read and tinkered with things nobody understood. My brother played football in high school. He wasn't great, but he was big, and in our neighborhood, that was enough. My dad drove 45 minutes each way to every single game. I ran cross country. I don't think my dad ever saw me finish a race. It wasn't that my parents were cruel. They weren't. They just had a clear picture in their heads of what success looked like, and it looked like my brother. He was loud and confident and drove a pickup truck and shook hands firmly. I was small and quiet and asked too many questions. When I was 16, I started building websites for local businesses. Nothing fancy. A dentist's office, a nail salon, a guy who sold custom furniture out of his garage. I charged a few $100s each. My mom called it my little hobby. My dad said it was nice that I had something to keep me busy. By the time I was in college, I had a roster of 20 clients and was clearing about $4,000 a month. I didn't tell my parents. There was no point. It wouldn't have fit into their framework. I studied computer science at Ohio State. Not because anyone pushed me to. Actually, my dad suggested business administration because it's more practical. I ignored that and signed up for CS my first week. I stayed in state to save money, worked remote consulting jobs on the side, graduated with almost no debt and a client list that had grown into something I barely had time to manage. My brother, meanwhile, had started a residential construction firm right out of college. It was called Hargrove Built, which was our last name, and he was very proud of that. My dad was thrilled. He told everyone at church. He told his guys at the golf course. He told the neighbors. My brother had a real business, with trucks, with a crew. I was still doing the laptop thing. After graduation, I moved to Austin, Texas, had no state income tax. The tech scene was exploding, and I needed to be somewhere that didn't constantly make me feel invisible. I found a 2-bedroom apartment, set up a real home office, and started taking on contracts that were actually commensurate with my skills. Within 2 years, I was doing enterprise-level software consulting, the kind of work where you bill in 6 figures per engagement. I had a handful of long-term clients, some equity stakes, and 2 SaaS companies I'd helped build from the ground up, and enough in my brokerage account to make me genuinely uncomfortable if I thought about it too hard. I did not tell my parents any of this. Not out of spite. I want to be clear about that. I didn't keep it secret to punish them. I kept it secret because every time I tried in the past to explain what I did, their eyes glazed over and my mom would change the subject to whether my brother's crew had finished a deck somewhere in Westerville. I stopped trying to translate my life into something they could celebrate. I just lived it. I flew home for Thanksgiving. I always did. I stayed for 4 days, slept in my old bedroom with the window that never closed right, and helped my mom cook. It was fine. My brother would come over with his wife, my nephew, who was somehow already 6 years old, and his business partner. Everyone would watch football. My dad would talk about Hargrove Built for most of the afternoon. That particular Thanksgiving was the one where it shifted. We were all at the table. Turkey, green bean casserole, The sweet potatoes my mom made with the marshmallows on top because my dad had never wanted to upgrade to anything more sophisticated. My brother had been talking about a big contract they'd just landed, a neighborhood of spec homes in Dublin, a suburb north of Columbus. He was animated, gesturing with his fork, explaining square footage and profit margins in the way that men do when they think everyone in the room is paying close attention. My aunt asked me what I was up to. I said I was doing well, still consulting, mostly working with tech companies on infrastructure projects. My brother cut in before I could finish my sentence. He didn't even look at me when he did it. He was still looking at my dad. She makes websites, he said, for, like, small businesses. It's a freelance thing. My aunt nodded and moved on. I looked down at my plate. That was fine. That had always been fine. But then, a few minutes later, my dad raised his glass and made a toast. To my brother. To Hargrove Built. To real work that builds real things. He looked proud in the way that I had wanted him to look proud my entire life. My brother grinned. My mom said, "We're so proud of you, honey." Nobody looked at me. I drove back to the airport the next morning, caught my flight to Austin, sat in the window seat, and looked at the clouds for 3 hours without reading or listening to anything. When I landed, I went straight home, made coffee, opened my laptop, and looked at my portfolio for a long time. The number had 7 digits. I closed the laptop and went to bed. Here's what I hadn't told anyone in my family. For the past 14 months, I had been a silent investor in Hargrove Built. My brother didn't know it was me. It had started almost accidentally. He'd been looking for a capital injection about a year and a half before that Thanksgiving dinner. His firm was growing faster than his cash flow could support. He had contracts but needed to front materials and payroll while waiting on draws from the general contractors. It's a common problem in residential construction. He went looking for private investors. A mutual connection, a guy I knew from a mastermind group I was part of online, mentioned it to me casually. Said my brother's firm was solid, growing, just needed runway capital. He didn't know we were related. My brother had listed the business under a holding company name and didn't use Hargrove in his investor materials. I thought about it for 2 weeks. Then I wired $300,000 through my LLC. My reasoning at the time was that it was a decent investment. Construction in Columbus was booming. My brother was not a genius, but he was a hard worker and he had good relationships with the subcontractors and developers in that market. The return terms were reasonable. I was diversifying into a sector I didn't usually touch. I also told myself, quietly, that if things ever got hard for my parents, if they needed something, having a stake in my brother's company was a way to be useful without having a conversation I didn't know how to have. By the time of that Thanksgiving dinner, my $300,000 had helped the firm triple in size. My brother was landing bigger contracts. He had 17 employees. He drove a nicer truck. My dad talked about him even more. I was still the one doing the laptop thing. Christmas that year was at my aunt's house. I drove in from the airport, walked into a room full of relatives I saw once a year, got hugged and asked if I was seeing anyone, and found my usual spot near the kitchen where I could be moderately useful and moderately invisible. My brother arrived late. He was in a good mood. "New contract," he announced. 40 homes in a development outside of New Albany. Biggest thing Hargrove Built had ever done. My dad looked like he might cry. Somewhere around 9 o'clock, when most of the kids had gotten sleepy and the adults had moved to the living room with their drinks, my brother settled into the armchair across from me and looked at me with the expression he'd been using since we were teenagers, something between pity and amusement. "You doing okay?" he said, "financially?" "I Matthew study my list, study my bills. Because if you ever need help, you can always come to me. I've got the business doing really well now. I could probably throw some work your way. Website stuff, whatever." I looked at him. "Thank you," I said. "I'm really okay." He nodded slowly, like he didn't quite believe me, but was being generous enough not to press it. "Mom worries about you," he said. "She thinks Austin is expensive." "It is," I said, "I manage." He patted my knee the way you'd pat the shoulder of someone who just lost a game. Then he got up to get another drink. I sat there for a moment. Then I took out my phone and opened my investment portal and looked at the current valuation of my stake in Hargrove Built. $640,000. I put my phone away and went to help my aunt with the dishes. February came fast. I got a call from the mutual connection, the one who'd originally told me about the investment opportunity. He sounded concerned. He said there was trouble with the New Albany development. The general contractor had run into financing issues and stopped issuing draws. Hargrove Built had fronted materials and labor for 2 months and was now waiting on over $400,000 that wasn't coming. My brother's firm was running out of operating cash. He was having trouble making payroll. I know this because I was also receiving investor updates which arrived in my inbox under a different name. I sat with the information for 3 days. I thought about the toast at Thanksgiving, about my brother patting my knee at Christmas, about 17 employees who had nothing to do with any of this and who had mortgages and kids and needed their paychecks. I also thought about my parents. Their house in Hilliard had a mortgage with about $90,000 left on it. My dad was 61. He'd put money into Hargrove Built informally over the years. Not a huge amount, but some. If the firm went under badly, it would touch them too. On the third day, I called my attorney in Austin. We had a conversation. Then I called my financial advisor. We had another conversation. And then I did two things. The first thing I did was quiet and took about 15 minutes. I directed my LLC to purchase my parents' remaining mortgage balance from the lender, $91,000. The paperwork would take a few weeks to process, but it was done. Their house was going to be paid off. They just didn't know it yet. The second thing I did was harder. I contacted the management of Hargrove Built through the investment channel, still anonymously, and indicated that I would not be providing any additional capital injection. My existing stake would remain. But I was not going to paper over the cash flow crisis with more money. My brother was going to have to solve this himself or restructure. I want to be honest about why I made that choice. It wasn't revenge. Or it wasn't only revenge, it was also the reality that bailing him out silently again would mean nothing changed. He would keep landing contracts he couldn't fully finance. He would keep operating on the assumption that the money would always be there. At some point, the firm would face a problem I couldn't quietly fix, and it would be worse. If he figured this out himself, if he had to sit across from a bank and negotiate a bridge loan, or go back to his investors and have hard conversations, or restructure the New Albany deal, he would come out the other side knowing something real. So I let it get uncomfortable. It got very uncomfortable. My mom called me in March. She sounded shaken in a way I hadn't heard before. She said my brother was having some trouble with the business. She said my dad was worried. She didn't have the details, but she knew it was serious. She asked if there was anything I could do. "What could I do?" I said gently. "I'm in tech." "I don't know," she said. "I just thought you're good with money, aren't you?" That was the first time she'd said that to me in 32 years. "I'll look into some things," I said. What I actually did was monitor the situation closely. My brother, to his credit, did not fall apart. He was on the phone constantly. He negotiated a partial payment from the stalled development's insurance. He went to 2 regional banks and got a short-term line of credit. He called his best subcontractors personally and asked them to defer billing for 60 days, and most of them said yes because he treated them decently for years. By April, he had stabilized. The firm was bruised but intact. He'd had to let 3 people go, which was hard, but the core crew was still there. He had solved it himself. I was genuinely proud of him. I didn't expect to be, but I was. The call came on a Tuesday evening in May. It was my brother. He never called me directly. We texted occasionally, saw each other at holidays, but he wasn't a phone call person with me. So when his name came up on my screen, I felt my stomach tighten slightly. "Hey," he said. Can I ask you something kind of weird? Sure, I said. Do you know anything about a company called Meridian Capital Ventures? I was quiet for exactly 1 second. Why? I said. Because during everything that was happening this spring, I was going through all my investor documentation. And I found something. The original investment, the one that came in 14 months ago, the 300K, it traced back to a holding company. And when I dug into that, it traced back to another LLC. And that LLC is registered in Texas. He paused. To someone with our last name. I didn't say anything. Simone, he said. Was that you? I looked out my window. The sky over Austin was doing that thing it does in May. Deep orange near the horizon, purple above it. The kind of sunset that feels like the city is showing off. Yes, I said. The silence on his end lasted long enough that I counted 8 seconds. Why? He said finally. Because it was a good investment, I said, and because I wanted to. You could have just told me. Could I? I said, at Thanksgiving, at Christmas, when you explained to our aunt that I make websites for small businesses. He didn't answer that. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. I'm really not. I didn't want it to be complicated. I wanted to invest in something that was going to do well, and your firm was going to do well, and I didn't need the credit for it. How much? He stopped, started again. How much do you actually have? I thought about how to answer that. I thought about all the dinners and all the toasts and all the times he patted my knee like I was someone who needed to be managed carefully. Enough, I said. He told my parents that weekend. My mom called me on Sunday morning. She didn't say hello. She just said, "Why didn't you tell us?" Tell you what? I said, because I wanted her to say it. That you had, your brother said. She stopped. He said you invested in his company. A lot of money. I did. And you have. Another pause. He said you have a lot of money, Simone. I'm okay, Mom. She was quiet for a moment. And then she said something that I didn't expect and that I have thought about every week since. She said, I think I didn't pay enough attention. Not I'm sorry. Not I was wrong. Just that. I didn't pay enough attention. It was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years, maybe ever. And it cracked something open in my chest that I'd kept sealed for a long time. It's okay, I said. It's not, she said. It really isn't. We talked for a long time after that, longer than we'd talked in years. She asked me real questions about my work, about Austin, about what I'd been building. She listened to the answers. She didn't change the subject. At the end of the call, she said, Your father wants to talk to you too. He doesn't know what to say yet, but he wants to. Tell him I'll call him this week, I said. Okay, she said. And then quietly, I'm proud of you. I should have said that a long time ago. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at my parents' house from their mortgage servicer. It said their loan had been paid in full. My mom called me again. She was crying this time. Not upset crying, just overwhelmed. What did you do? She kept saying. What did you do? Your house is yours, I said. It's done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. My dad got on the phone. He didn't say much. He said, Simone. And then he said my name again, like he was reminding himself of something, like he was recalibrating. Dad, I said, it's okay. I nafchin. He stopped. I didn't see you right. I know, I said. I know you didn't. I'm sorry. I hadn't heard him say those 2 words to me in my entire life. My dad was not a man who said sorry. He said things like, that's just how it is. And you'll understand when you're older, and your brother went through the same thing. He did not say sorry. He said it then. I had to put the phone down for a second and look at the ceiling. I know, I said again when I came back. I know, Dad. My brother and I had lunch together when I was home in June. Just the 2 of us at a diner we used to go to when we were kids. He ordered the same thing he always ordered: patty melt, fries, black coffee. I had the same thing too, for the first time in 20 years. It was exactly as good as I remembered. We talked about the firm he was rebuilding carefully, taking on contracts he could actually sustain, not chasing the biggest number. He'd brought in a CFO on a part-time basis, a woman who used to work for a regional developer, and she was helping him build real financial systems. He was proud of her in the way that people get proud when someone has genuinely helped them. "I want to understand what you do," he said, halfway through his patty melt. "Like, actually understand it. Not just websites. What do you actually do?" So I told him the whole thing: the consulting, the SaaS investments, the enterprise clients, the equity stakes, the way I'd spent 15 years building something that didn't require a physical crew or a truck or any of the things that had always signaled real work to our family. He listened. He asked questions that were actually good questions about risk, about recurring revenue, about how I found clients. He had a better business mind than I'd given him credit for. The construction work had taught him things. "You should have told me years ago," he said. "You wouldn't have believed me," I said. He opened his mouth to disagree and then closed it again, because he knew it was true. "Fair," he said. We split the check. He reached for it first and I let him, because I understood that it mattered to him, and because some things you don't need to make a point about. We walked out to the parking lot. His truck was next to my rental car. He was taller than me by almost a foot and broader by half. Standing next to him had always made me feel like the smaller, less significant version of a Hargrove. He put his hand on my shoulder, not a patronizing pat, a real hand on a shoulder. "I'm glad it was you," he said. "That invested. I'm glad it was you." I nodded. "Me too," I said. I drove back to my parents' house. The mortgage was paid. The house was quiet in the afternoon light, exactly the same as it had always been. The same shutters, the same mailbox my dad had put up the year I was born, the same slightly uneven front step that everyone in the family knew to skip over. I sat in the rental car in the driveway for a minute. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't cried. I hadn't made a speech or sent a confrontational text or done any of the things that people do when they want to be seen. I just built something quietly while everyone was looking somewhere else. And in the end, it was enough. It was more than enough. I got out of the car and went inside, and my mom had coffee ready, and my dad was watching something in the living room. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I walked into that house and didn't feel like a guest in it. I keep thinking about that driveway, sitting in the rental car, engine off, looking at the front step my dad had never fixed, the one everyone in the family knew to skip over. 32 years of coming home to that house and feeling like I was visiting someone else's life. And then, that afternoon in June, just not feeling that way anymore. I don't think the mortgage check changed my parents. I don't think one phone call erased decades of not being seen. That's not how any of this works. What changed was something quieter, a slow, accumulating pressure that had finally found somewhere to go. My dad said, "I'm sorry," and meant it. My mom said she hadn't paid enough attention and meant that too. Those two sentences didn't fix everything, but they were true, and truth has a weight that performances don't. I've thought a lot about why I made the choices I made, the investment, the silence, the decision not to bail my brother out a second time. I wasn't trying to teach anyone a lesson. I really wasn't. But I do think there's something in how I was raised, something in all those years of being overlooked, that quietly shaped the way I move through the world. When nobody is watching you, you either fall apart or you build something real. I built something real, not because I was proving a point, because it was the only thing that made sense to me. My brother had to face a genuine crisis this past spring. No safety net, no quiet wire transfer, just him and a phone and a list of people he'd treated well enough over the years that they were willing to give him 60 days. He figured it out. That mattered. Not because hardship is inherently good for people, but because he discovered something about his own capacity that he wouldn't have found any other way. There's a version of me that could have wired him the money and kept everything smooth, but I think I would have been doing him a disservice. Sometimes the most decent thing you can do for someone is let them carry their own weight. What I keep coming back to is this: the things that made my childhood hard were the same things that made me capable. The invisibility taught me patience. The dismissal taught me to stop needing validation from people who hadn't earned the right to give it. The years of being underestimated taught me to think clearly, plan carefully, and act without fanfare. I'm not grateful for the pain of it, but I understand now that character doesn't come from being told you're exceptional. It comes from continuing to show up when nobody is paying attention. My brother and I split a check at a diner in Columbus and talked like two adults who were finally meeting each other for the first time. That felt like something, not a resolution, more like a beginning. Families don't get repaired in a single afternoon, but they can start to be honest with each other, and honesty is where everything real begins. I got out of that rental car and went inside, and my mom had coffee ready. That was enough. That has always been enough if you know where to look for it.